It's gonna be worse than I even thought. Later, Fan Radio Network.
What do you mean?
And KFAN.com. 55 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock. Central Daylight Time. Welcome back. Thursday production, bumper-to-bumper program. Afternoon Aardvark, hosted by the A-Hole in the afternoon. Guardsy produces the show. I'm the A-Hole. My name's Dan Barreiro, and we are delighted to be with you for the next 3.5 hours of what should be pure radio entertainment, pretty much from start, and I'd like to think all the way to the finish line. Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line will be along for the ride, 646-86. That will be rebooted very, very shortly, and we'll give you an outstanding array of guests. I should mention that you, the listener, among the guests, Dr. Dan's inbox is scheduled to be open today at 4:30, so you still have a full 90 minutes to get in on the fun, to craft your snark and pass it along to JG at KFAN.com, JG at KFAN.com. Guardsy, we talked about it, kind of predicted it yesterday, but I already am convinced it's going to be even worse than I might have predicted or that I thought. And by even worse, what are we discussing here? What are we talking about here? What should be obvious? It's the elephant in the room conversation. It's the Vikings quarterback saga. We now have the amateur media psychologists, the Jackals. None of them, I think, clinically qualified to get into people's heads the way they are already attempting to, telling us, for example, that it sure sounds like J.J. McCarthy, the kid, 9, is pouting. He's annoyed. Doesn't like having to share the spotlight with another quarterback and possibly not even start the season as the Vikings' #1 quarterback. How do we know this? Well, the words seemed, I don't know, a little edgy. I'm not exactly sure what people expected him to say or wanted him to say, but beyond that, you know what else we found out yesterday? Early warm-ups.
Yeah.
3 of the quarterbacks, including your guy, Brosmer, in one section, and on, like, miles away at the Egan outlet shops.
Nice mall, by the way.
Very nice.
Underrated.
Stretching that far away by himself.
By the Claires.
J.J. McCarthy.
Sunglass Hut.
My God, it's going to be worse than I even could have anticipated. And I know the comeback is, well, it's Vikings' fault. They won't declare. They don't have to declare who the guy is, but if they're not going to declare, then it's open season on speculation and analyzing pretty much everything. In all honesty, I mean, I don't think, been J.J. McCarthy's biggest supporter. Even though I did like you did, the move to go up in the draft and get him.
Yeah.
I think he's down. No matter what he would have said, if he'd have been like, "Hey, this is great having a quarterback of his vintage here. I sit right next to him. I try to soak up everything he can give me." What's the comeback to that going to be? Man, awfully complacent.
Right.
It's almost like he's conceding the job. He knows he doesn't even have a chance. What happened to 9, the competitor? So I don't exactly know how in the hell we're going to survive this, because if it has started already, May, what's today, 28, yesterday the 27th, my God, it might not ever end. And I said yesterday, and I stand by this, I think it's likely that the only way McCarthy starts the opener is if he doesn't just win training camp on points, but knocks out Kyler Murray. I think that's the only way. Now, that's very different than what I think is fair. Because I said this, if you recall, when we go back to the whole Kyler Murray speculation, before he got here, or as it looked like there was a good chance that's the guy who we were going to settle on. I said then, I think the best case scenario is the Vikings, indeed, from the minute they do it, declare it an open competition. Why should Kyler Murray? Kyler Murray was rejected by the team that had him for the last 7 years. And I get it. It's not the most well-run franchise, but the fact is they're eating how much money? Isn't it like 30 or 40 million?
35 mil, something like that.
So, and what's funny about it, when I said that then, this was the comeback from some of the Jackals. Well, if you're going to get Kyler, you're going to have to pretty much guarantee him or tell him that's how you get him. I mean, come on. He's been a starter in the league for 7 years. He's not just going to walk into a competition. And I said, that might be true, and maybe, that was the only way to get him. I don't know who else was really after him. I don't know if we'll ever know. But I said then, as someone who was very disappointed in how McCarthy played, alarmed by much of his play last year, that the best case for this training camp, I said, let's have a true, honest-to-God quarterback competition, and may the best quarterback win. I didn't really think that right now Murray's seniority should have been enough to say, well, he's got to be, you bring him here, he's got to be the guy. And again, I was told then, well, there's got to be, even if they're not going to say it publicly, that sort of has to be the way it's set up, because that's just the way it works in the NFL. He's going to have the upper hand. Now, I've come to the conclusion, as I mentioned yesterday, that the Vikings' decision on Kyler indicates a certain measure of terror about relying on J.J. McCarthy, even after another year of experience where you say, well, maybe some stuff's going to start clicking in. They were just too concerned about that. But I have no problem if it really is a completely open, whatever we see, we're going to go by a competition. All I know is the amateur psychology work that's going to be done, analyzing, reanalyzing, recalibrating every sentence. Like, it was even the thing about, well, what was the code for he's on one side of the classroom and I'm on the other side of the classroom?
Right.
Why aren't they side by side in the classroom? Why isn't Kyler on JJ's lap? What's the deal here?
He's short enough.
Well, I thought it. You said it.
Yeah,
so
we all did.
In all seriousness, in some ways it'll fill lots of radio hours.
Oh, it's going to be unbelievable.
There's no question.
Yeah.
But I think I'm already worried about some of the conclusions we're jumping to on the slimmest of evidence. And I'll say again, let's say for the sake of argument, JJ was pouty or is annoyed. Isn't that what you want him to be a little bit?
Now, I thought that was the point.
You don't want him, right, to quote-unquote get his attention. Now, you don't want him to wallow in his pity, self-pity. You want him to be angry because he thinks he's still good enough to be the guy, and he's annoyed that the team had to go another direction. But you also want him to be honest with himself that, well, if you'd played better, start to finish, we wouldn't have gone down the road that we did, right? But the idea of, I'm just telling you, I guarantee you, if he was peachy keen, everything's great, I welcome him with open arms. I can't wait to work with him. And if he's the man, he's the man. It would be, where's the edge? The 9
where's
edge
9?
We heard so much about.
Yeah, where's
right?
the competitor?
So I don't know where it goes. But again, and I don't know if you ever stated a position on the front end here, because I don't think either guy has done enough recently to be in a position of authority. And that's why when all the Kyler talk transpired, I said, okay, I mean, all right, you got to put somebody else in the mix, and maybe that's the best that you can do. But despite 7 years in the league, what he's done recently, Kyler, that's not enough for me to say, I have to anoint you. I think as a head coach, I have a right to say, Kyler, we think we can work together with you. We like some of the things you've done, but we also like what JJ. There was a reason we moved up in the draft to select JJ McCarthy. So we're just going to let it go how it goes. There's no guarantees on anything here. I just don't think he's got enough equity anymore, Kyler, that, oh, it's Kyler Murray. You absolutely have to turn the thing over to him. So, but now the Jackals are saying, well, why would the coach have to say anything more than they're saying? Well, that might be true, but I think it's a little disingenuous if on the front end, the thinking was the only way you get him is to kind of wink, wink and tell him that he's going to be the guy. And if that's the case, then all right, let's not change the story. What, 2 months, however long it's been since he's first been brought in here. Where were you on the whole deal of, like, you say if you're bringing in Kyler, if you're bringing in Aaron Rodgers,
yeah,
you know he's the starter,
right?
Correct,
right.
And I think there is enough equity for Aaron Rodgers,
yes.
Even if you could say at this point he's not a better quarterback than Kyler Murray. You could make that argument. I would still say I would defer to Rodgers. But where are you on that whole deal?
I think I'm more you had to let him know he was probably going to be the starter. And it's not even letting him know as much as it's letting everybody else know that we're going in another direction, at least for the start. I don't think you could have risked having JJ be really the only guy. You know what I mean?
I agree with that totally. You had to hedge your bet.
So I think if that meant you had to maybe guarantee Kyler more than maybe you even wanted to, I think that was the position that you were in. I don't know who the other options would have been if you didn't have a Kyler Murray. Like you mentioned, who else was after Kyler? There were a couple. I don't remember.
Yeah, you're right.
I think maybe Pittsburgh, maybe New York.
Well, and who's Jones, the 49ers backup, but allegedly the price was too high there. Right. I don't know how interested we were in him, but that was another name that came up.
Yeah, like I don't know if there was a bevy of options that they could have turned to if the Kyler thing didn't work out. So I don't think they were in the greatest position where they maybe did have to concede more than they should have conceded or even wanted to concede.
Well, I think my position at the time was, if that's the case, I would look elsewhere. I don't think that you should have to do it, but I also understand that McCarthy's going to have to, in an active way, prove to them now that he's in a place where they can trust him. And let's face it, last year he was grandfathered in. He was handed the position last year. They thought they'd built the infrastructure around him, and we're just going to bring him along, and we might have there's going to be a couple of dips, but we're going to be fine with it. And it was disastrous right after the fourth quarter comeback against the Bears. Then it was injury. So I'm not saying I blame the Vikings. I think the Vikings had no choice. I'd have done that a year ago. I'm on record on that. They had no choice but to add another piece. But I think I grade these guys differently, and in Murray's case, I say, well, yeah, I don't think you've done enough to be automatically in that position. The unknown is if his agent says, all right, that's fine. We got two other teams that are ready to announce from first day that he is the number one quarterback. Murray seems to be fine with the rhetoric, the way it's being expressed by the team so far, but that might be because he knows.
He knows something. Yep.
And as I said, I think I stand by what I said yesterday. I think he's going to have to win, he being McCarthy, win it in a knockout. I'm not even sure that's fair. But I do think they got some baggage with JJ right now. They got a little bit of trauma with the way it went a year ago. The head coach has strong survival instincts, like any coach, right? And so he may have plenty of years left in this contract, but he's got to realize at some point we got to make some hay here. So I think that makes it likely that what they're trying to set up is preparing Kyler Murray for the first game. And how you even evaluate what's interesting, of course, about spring train or training camp is, because somebody's bringing this up, you really can't evaluate much on preseason football anymore.
Not really.
Nobody does.
No.
So the assumption is you got things you know what to look for as the quarterback whisperer in practice, right? There are mechanisms through which you can get a pretty good handle on whether Kyler's picking the stuff up that we want and is heading in the right direction, or, I guess, on the outside chance that McCarthy hits the field, and it's like, oh, my God, look at what his command is better. He's getting rid of the ball better. He's making better decisions. And if he does all those things, I think he should have a right to end up starting. I really do. That's why I would have kept it open, but we will see. We will do our best. I guess we have to make a decision. Do we want to do the exact same kind of amateur psychoanalysis and projecting that has already begun in a downright irrational way? Or do we want to pretend we're above it? Because I have a hunch I'm not going to be able to stay as above it as I'm pretending today.
Yeah, I think we just need to dive right in.
You think we do?
And honestly, where I learned that we're in a different era was around the Combine, when every single day, it wasn't just us here at the Fan. It wasn't just local people. It was every single national show was talking about Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy. I'm not saying they need to be our...
Yes.
I'm not saying they should be our North Star.
In part because right now, even by NFL standards, there's nothing else.
Right, but even during the Combine, when the whole thing was kind of starting,
right,
it was a lot of J.J. and a lot of Kyler. And yeah, there's not a lot else. But the fact that they're playing the hits on it, I think can be a guiding light for us and give us excuse to also dive in as much as we want.
Yeah. Well, a lot of interesting texts are already coming in here. We'll try to get to some of those after a brief pause, and we'll get to our outstanding uglydeck.com guest lineup above and beyond Dr. Den's inbox, which, as I said, will be opened at 4:30 this evening. Dew point much better today. Did you notice that? Much better. Way down. I think it's like 10 degrees down in terms of the moistness out there, which I'm all for. Do we believe, and here we're attempting the amateur psychology route that I've just ripped, but at least I think it'll be a more general exploration, not based on any one statement. Because already what McCarthy's being, graded on is one statement. I'm sitting on the other side of the classroom. He was apparently, it was noted that, I don't know if this was during stretching or whatever, that he was the one quarterback off by himself, away from the other three. Oh, no, not that, anything but that. But I will ask this question. He's not, over the course of time he's been here, I think exhibited what I would classify as a great deal of maturity, even though we were told ad nauseum by players, you gravitate towards him. Natural leader. You just see it in him, which I never completely understood because I didn't really see much evidence of it. But do you have any concern that he doesn't understand why the Vikings felt compelled to add another quarterback to the mix? Because that would be frightening. That's the old deal of self-reflection.
Yeah. That's
the deal of looking in the mirror and saying, yeah, I don't love it. I'm a competitor. I'm 9. But it didn't go very well. It finished. He was selling yesterday how he finished.
Right.
But do you have any concern? Because that's a problem. If he can't own up to what a struggle it was, historically bad at times last year, even by first year, as in his first time playing consistently, quarterback standards.
Maybe, but was he enabled at all last season by how they did bring him along and by how they did kind of talk about him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Was he enabled to say, well, these are just growing pains and I'm a young quarterback and I'm going along with it? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Because it shifted so fast on him from, we believe this is our guy.
Sure did.
We believe everything, even from when he was injured, to then, well, but we got to get back to some basics. And all of a sudden, then we're starting to hear, well, they don't really love how he's going about his business. Base, balance, body, and Brosmer.
Right.
Feet and eyes, all the stuff that they're trying to do. He might have a little cover and just because I don't think he was handled well at all last year.
No.
Obviously, it didn't go well. But number one, just giving him the job, which we can argue about that. Was that a smart decision? In hindsight, obviously it wasn't. But also just how they were trying to do all this stuff on the fly during the season, I still don't think was the greatest approach to developing him and doing the playbook like they did it, and then all of a sudden they stripped it down. Like, as much as we all want to pound away on JJ, and there's a lot of meat on that bone. I don't think the team, the coaches, the organization handled any of this right. So he might get a little cover from me there. If
see, the anger side of this is what's interesting psychologically, because I think you do want him annoyed and angry, because if it's channeled the right way, and what is, of course, the right way? I'm going to do 25 more things than I thought I was going to have to do.
Right.
I'm going to whether it's working on fundamentals, whether it's more study in the classroom, whatever the blend of things that he needs to do to get to a place where he's viewed as a National Football League quarterback. If this drives him to do that or more of that, then you don't apologize for annoying him, right? Or if he gets mad. If it's channeled as in the sort of rage, like, well, they don't get me, they don't understand, they don't know how good I am. I'm already ahead of where they think by the end of the season, I'm ahead of where they think I am. Therefore, I'm not happy they brought somebody else in. I honestly don't think most big-time legendary coaches would say they're anything but delighted if he's miffed. As long as they feel like, as head coach, that person can help channel that with him to put it to the right use, that anger to the right use, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the whole thing is about.
Yeah.
I think you want a little bit of that. If that means he's a little crankier, you'll take that, won't you? If again, all the signs are he's working in ways that he didn't before, and he's going to stop calling himself 9 because maybe he thinks that's a little bit, get to all that stuff later, all the trappings of being a quarterback. Maybe we hold off on that. I don't know if anybody's had that conversation with him, his agent, or anybody else.
Well, we know the head coach did.
He did
through the media. I'm sure it came up because we're a transparent and authentic organization. I'm sure it did come up during the one-on-one meetings as well. But also, you'd hope that they would know how he would handle it and approach it. You'd hope that they would already have had that kind of due diligence, like in the draft process. What's he like when his back's against the wall? When has he had to prove himself? You know, those types of things.
Yeah.
You'd hope whatever the reaction is would be further emboldening your own opinions on.
Yes.
Like we figure if we push this guy, he's going to do X, Y, and Z. Because if he doesn't, then that's an indictment again on the type of guy that you drafted and put so much equity in.
He has no reason to feel comfortable. He has not earned the option of feeling comfortable, like some quarterbacks might, or say, well, you drafted me, you bring me along. He hasn't done nearly enough. He should feel uncomfortable. His own performance has contributed to that. You can argue the coaches have, the approach that they've taken, their expectations, etc. 701 guy writes, I can't wait to critique the Kyler JJ relationship at the Thielen Foundation softball game tonight.
Are they both there? Are they both part of the offensive team?
Believe me, if they are,
yeah,
the Jackals will find out.
Yes.
And that'll be the next step in this. That'll be the next
field.
Won't that be the next round? It would have to be, right?
What if JJ demands that he become a pitcher and he does like a brushback on Kyler?
Alan in Afton writes, Dan, are you just baiting the JJ justifiers and the Kyler qualifiers this discussion? I know you really don't care and you're just stirring the pot. And why are we forgetting about Chris? What's Wentz's first name?
Carson.
Why did I say Chris? He may be the best in the stable and closest to Darnold in general. Yeah, why are you writing off Wentz? You're in that group. Who was the toughest quarterback last year physically for this team?
Well, that's, I think, part of it is you're hoping that his shoulder has been reattached.
Yeah.
All the injuries that he had.
That's
or we
true.
just left him out there to die.
Yeah.
Because he played well enough. They won some games with him.
Your guy might be the odd man out this year.
Brosmer?
Unless they keep 5 or 4. We'll see.
I don't know what the rules are on how
practice
many they
squad.
can keep.
I don't know how that works.
I don't know either.
I mentioned guests today. We've got Alec Lewis. Speaking of the Vikings, we'll revisit a lot of what we've discussed already, at 5:15, right after the top five at 5. And when we come back, our old buddy from Thrifty Traveler, MN, Kyle Potter, kind enough to join us. He's got a couple things up his sleeve. If you have travel-related questions, he's always willing to answer them. That's the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line, which is 64686.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan.
It happens only once a year in Las Vegas.
Our legend.
Indeed back. I'm trying to get the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line rebooted just in time for our first scheduled guest today. Alec Lewis, 5:15. Dr. Dan's inbox will be opened at 4:30. Email Garzi, JG, at KFAN.com if you have indeed forgotten. Kyle Potter now joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. He, of course, is the executive editor of Thrifty Traveler. .com and co-host of the highly controversial, they tell me, Thrifty Traveler podcast. Now, in the podcast, do you venture beyond the world of travel? Is that why it's controversial?
Is Garzi getting in your ear again, speaking mistruths about being controversial?
I'm afraid I can only blame myself for that. I like to just sort of throw, because I think it ends up working to the benefit of many people. Oh, controversial. Okay, kind of edgy. Who knows? Might be more than traveler stuff. There might be some other things there too. So I don't even think it's necessarily all bad.
You know what? If we're not making some people upset, I think we're not doing our jobs. I think the same goes for you. So you know what? I will wear controversial. Yeah. Like a badge of honor.
Well, tell me, by the way, you got a live podcast event, is that correct, coming up in mid-June?
Yeah, we convinced Gunnar, my co-host, and I convinced our boss to let us make fools of ourselves up on stage in front of what's turning out to be like 250 plus people.
Excellent.
At the Parkway Theater in South Minneapolis, which I just want to say is one of, if not my favorite places in the city. If you haven't been there, whether it's for our event on Friday, June 12th, or something else, it is one of the coolest historic theaters in the city, if not the region, if not the country. So just a really fun night of talking about travel, definitely making fun of ourselves, maybe making fun of others. We'll see. The jury is out on that, but it should be a really, really cool, fun night and a fun thing for us to do for the podcast, which has just been I've said this before, I'll say it again. It is the most fun that I've had in this job, covering and talking and writing about travel for the last going on 8 years now.
I can imagine. And tickets still available if folks want to get in on that, maybe thriftytraveler.com. Is that correct?
Yep, go to thriftytraveler.com. If you want to go straight to buy tickets, you can just type in thriftytraveler.com/live, LIVE. Still tickets for sale, but this is going to get pretty close to selling out in the next 2 weeks here as this comes closer and closer.
The number one, as we enter the summer period, the number one air travel related issue is what?
I think it's got to be airfare. I think this has been on everyone's mind is, jet fuel prices are up. I'm paying much more at the pump. What is that going to mean for my flight prices? Or people are looking to lock in their late summer trips and in some cases are horrified by what they see. I mean, this is something that we're talking about. Literally in some way every single week on our podcast, every day in some form on our website and in our newsletters. I think it's the number one issue in travel right now, and it's not really even close.
Interesting. And so we've got, is there any pattern to what's going on in this, chaotic period in terms of fares or any way? I mean, is there any way for people who are obviously always trying to, save money to sort of navigate the madness?
Yes and no. I mean, the problem is, and I think I've given you this line before. Airfare is not a monolith. Airfare is millions upon millions of different fares and different inventory buckets between city A and B and city Y and Z, and some go up and some go down. And that's what builds into the big picture numbers that is driving up, on average, prices across the board. But the problem with trying to answer this is that when people say flight prices are way up, what they're actually saying is, I need to go from Minneapolis to Phoenix on August 11th and come home on August 15th. And what can you do about that? And the only honest answer is that there's not a lot that I can do a lot. And there's certainly nothing that I can tell you right now. I wish I had a crystal ball where I could look at it and say, if you wait 3 weeks, those prices are going to go down. What I can tell you is that flexibility is always the most important thing when it comes to getting a better price on flights. And especially in times like now, when flight prices are generally speaking up, it is absolutely critical. If you can be flexible enough to change your travel dates by a day, or to maybe even put off that trip to Phoenix and go somewhere else where you can find a better deal, that is the most important thing that you can do right now.
As I mentioned, we'll be glad to include, if some good questions already coming in, for Kyle Potter, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 64686. Did I see, we'll get to Spirit and even, the ramifications now that it's been, now we have better maybe information on it of Sun Country in its merger with Allegiant. But did I see a headline indicating that Delta Airlines has been an airline historically that's prided itself on we don't cancel flights, that has been forced to cancel more flights than usual? Did I imagine such a thing? Is there such a thing? What can you tell me?
Yeah, no, you're not making this up. No question, Delta has slipped. And again, this is that same situation where people don't care about, is Delta the most reliable airline in the country? What they care about is, do they get to Phoenix on time? But on the whole, Delta is not putting up the numbers that we would expect them to see, where they have for, the better part of a decade now been the number one most reliable airline in the country. And number two is typically somewhere pretty far down that list. And just within the last, probably within the last year, but more pronounced within the last 6 or so months, they have really struggled. And that is a big can of worms that airline really needs to fix, because Delta doesn't get to be the premium airline that charges its customers, especially here in Minneapolis, but, at other big hubs like Atlanta and Boston and Salt Lake City. They don't get to charge people more if they can't get you to where you need to go on time reliably. You can't be a premium airline that charges people more without first and foremost being able to be counted on. So they've got to get this sorted out, and they've got to get it sorted out yesterday.
What has contributed to the slippage?
It's a lot, and I think I'll know a little bit more in probably the weeks and months to come as they start to make these fixes. There are some very nuanced problems with pilot contracts and how they bring in people to cover flights, where some of their technology and some of the agreements that they've made with the unions have really started to come back to bite them. That is a big piece of it. There's also always a weather piece of it where, if you have the right hubs in the wrong places at the wrong time of year, it creates a snowball effect where it becomes, pretty hard to catch up. And having your single most important hub in Atlanta, which has been consistently creamed by storms for the last 3 or 4 months, does not set you up for success. Here's the thing. When things go wrong to this magnitude, and we're not talking about repeat massive nationwide meltdown after meltdown. It is not that bad, fortunately. But things still clearly have gone wrong enough that Delta has slipped from number one all the time to somewhere in the middle of the pack, and sometimes worse. it is never just one problem. It's a lot of things that they got to get in right shape.
Delta, didn't they make an announcement earlier this month also that on so-called shorter routes, they were ending food and beverage service? I feel like this is the trend across the board anyway. I don't know. I don't even know if anybody reacts to that anymore. Do you know much about that?
You know, I will say I think people do react to it, and this was and became a nationwide story, right or wrong. I would say not to tell consumers what they should believe and what they should expect when they're paying $500+ a round trip ticket. It seems a little unfair. I think this got swept into the nationwide conversation of, you know, CEOs are making more money than ever. Airlines are multi-billion-dollar enterprises, and you can't give me a $2 can of Coke and a $1 bag of Cheez-Its. And I sympathize with that. I am on that side. The problem here is that this was, if you put it in perspective, a relatively minor cut. Because here's the perspective. We're talking about flights that are 350 miles or less. Minneapolis to Chicago measures just under that mark. So that's the kind of length of flight that we're talking about, really less than an hour in the air. And already Delta hadn't been doing this for flights that were shorter than 250 miles in length. So we're talking about, you know, probably nationwide a couple hundred flights per day at most that are truly affected by this change.
Is it though? You know this industry pretty well. Are there any airlines who try to buck the trend, which seems to be less, and less, right? We're going to give you less because we got to save money, or we think it's a shorter flight, or whatever. Is there such a thing as an airline that says we're going the exact opposite way because we think that can become our identity, or is it not viewed as big enough distinction to even strategize that way?
If there is, that airline has failed. I would put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why there isn't an airline that truly does the white glove service, boarding gate to car door, and there's also a reason why Spirit Airlines failed. Is most airlines got to find somewhere in the middle where they can keep their costs relatively low, but still justify charging higher fares. Now, that's not to say that, some airline isn't going to come out and say, we're going to serve you that can of Coke and that bottle of water on a 350-mile flight. Somebody probably will to make hay of, how Delta somehow wound up stepping in it with this. There are smart ways to thread the needle, and I do think that more airlines should find smart ways to do that by doing more for customers than less. But when push comes to shove, investors always call the shots. Investors are the shareholders. They own these airlines. They are publicly traded companies that are accountable first and foremost to shareholders. And shareholders want lower costs, not higher costs. And so that's what's driving a lot of what we see, not just this year, not just post-pandemic, but for the last, 50 plus years of aviation.
This is from 701 guy, really kind of dovetailing with what I just asked you, but he had already sent this text in. I'm going to read it. This will sound snobby, but I don't care. I've read about JSX Airlines, and does Kyle think we will see more airlines offering a more premium experience in the future? You kind of maybe already answered that question. He admits that maybe this is more for snobby traveler guy rather than thrifty traveler guy, but nevertheless, he was interested in your reaction.
I don't. And it's because of what I just went through about how, lower costs are so important to airlines and especially their investors. JSX is a really interesting model in that, they do more for customers, but part of how they do that is by not operating as a traditional commercial carrier. They are using different facilities at airports that are not open to the likes of Delta and American and United and Southwest. And that's part of how they're able to thread the needle. But that also really means that they have a long, tall hill to climb in order to grow anywhere at the scale where, those of us here in Minneapolis would benefit from something like that. That's my off-the-cuff take. I'll have to think about it a little more because it's an interesting question.
It is. I think it definitely is. Where do they operate all over the JSX? I don't know much about them. Is it just selected airports, or how big is JSX?
I would want to look at some numbers before I give you a definitive answer, but they're pretty small. It's a lot of stuff. I think especially on the West Coast is where a lot of their operations are. And you'll see them referred to as a pseudo-private airline. So their branding and their marketing is like, well, you're getting your own plane, but of course, you've got your seat along with 12 to 20 to 30 others on board. There's just, I don't know what else to say about them right now. You'll have to give me some time and let me come back to that one.
That's fair. I've had a couple texts along these same lines. In fact, let me read the first one. I think I saved it. When would be the best time? This is from Polly out of Oakdale. When would be the best time to buy tickets to Mexico City for the Vikings 49ers game the week before Thanksgiving? And do I need to book in a public library? And I didn't understand what that meant. And then somebody else had texted separately, is the rumor true that you can get better fares if you go to the library and work off of their computers?
Okay, so you haven't heard the library thing, which is incredibly online, and honestly good for you for missing it because you're not missing out. You have, however, heard book on Tuesday morning for the best price, or book, clear your cookies or use a VPN. These are all just different chapters of the same book, which is, this is not how airfare works. Airlines are not tracking your searches and manipulating prices. They are not doing that, period. Clearing your cookies does not work, does not change the price that you see when you go to purchase and check out for a flight, in the same way that using a VPN doesn't result in a different price, in the same way that going to a public library and using a different IPN doesn't change the price that you see. Airfare is maddening, and it changes all the time. And people understandably latch on to simple and easy to understand explanations for why that happens, why they look at a flight 1 minute and it's $150, and then they go back to book it an hour or two later and it's $250. And I get why it seems like this is what's happening, but it is not, because airlines don't have the capability to watch what you're searching for and adjust prices on the fly accordingly. So the library thing is definitely not a thing.
This is going to disappoint the tinfoil crowd, as you know, but that's why we have you on. You mentioned, or we talked briefly a little bit about Spirit Airlines. It's done. What has that done to the industry beyond that airlines being gone? How big a hit? How much has that transformed things, if at all?
On the one hand, not so much, because Spirit, by the time it went out of business, was really a shadow of its former self. On the other hand, it is still very critical, and it's an absence that we should all be really aware of and care about for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, a couple of thousand, if not 10,000 more people lost their jobs as a result of that. And some of them will go to work for other airlines, but many of them will not be able to find that work. And that's terrible. Bigger picture for consumers and what they care about, i.e. cheaper tickets, this is massive, because even though Spirit wasn't as big as it was had we been talking about this a couple of years ago, they still played an undeniable effect in forcing other carriers, even Delta, even United, even American and Southwest, to lower their fares to compete. So just as one small example of this, Spirit, before it went out of business, actually left the market in Minneapolis in December of 2025, early last winter. when it was still flying, it offered nonstop flights from Minneapolis to both Detroit and Atlanta, two massive Delta hubs. Before Spirit left that market, you could get a nonstop Delta flight to either airport for $269, $249, sometimes less. And a Spirit flight for far less than that. After they left, those prices went up into the neighborhood of $450 or more, borderline overnight. And you start to spread that across the entire network that Spirit was flying when it went out of business, and that can be crushing. And that is honestly a piece, not the biggest piece, but not the smallest one either, of why people are upset at what airfare looks like today. It's because there is less competition from low-cost carriers like Spirit.
Are there any discernible, noticeable signs, even morsels, of Sun Country left since the merger with Allegiant?
To be honest, it is business as usual for now. Nothing has changed. What has changed is who's calling the shots. But that is going to take a lot of time to start to play out, because while the financial transaction of Allegiant acquiring Sun Country has closed, and that on paper, two airlines are now one, in practice, this is going to take years. First and foremost, just for the actual logistics of running two airlines as one, that's going to take a lot of time. I mean, we're probably talking, 12 to 18 months, maybe more, for that process to really move forward. And in that, and then beyond that, the question is, with Allegiant and its CEO now calling the shots, and its headquarters being in Las Vegas, do they care as much about Minneapolis? An airport and an airline in Sun Country that has really been a scrappy competitor to Delta and carved out a niche and figured out a way to coexist with Delta here in offering, the vacationers and people who want to just get to Florida or Phoenix a cheaper fare than what Delta will sell it to them for. That is not what Allegiant does. Allegiant's entire business model is really built around flying between smaller cities where it can carve out something close to a monopoly. And that is not Minneapolis. Then, once we get, months, if not years, that's when I start to have questions about, whether the DNA of Sun Country is still here.
Last item for today. Does Kyle think Air Canada will discontinue service and MSP if the high fuel prices persist like they have for other smaller airports?
Oh, I hope not. Again, that's an instance where less competition is always bad for people who want to fly up to Canada. I believe, as we're talking right now, Air Canada still flies nonstop to both Montreal and Toronto, but they've already cut some of those frequencies back. So it honestly, it wouldn't surprise me either way. I mean, the only thing that really matters is how long do jet fuel prices stay elevated? And the longer it goes on, the more likely we start to see cutbacks like that. So I just don't know.
Any bargains? A couple people are asking before we go. I guess I should always throw that in at least once when we chat. Given, as you say, how volatile it is right now, are there any bargains available for summer trips? What's the rule of thumb for there? How could you guide people?
The biggest rule of thumb is not to harp on this, flexibility is everything.
Yeah, on time.
So go into this trying to be flexible with when you travel, and especially if you're talking about summer, the sweet spot is always mid-August and onward. The peak of peak summer, which always drives the prices higher, typically runs from sometime in early June until the second week in August. And then after that, things really start to cool down, which means you can almost always get a much better deal by traveling in mid to late August instead of late July. So if you can start to plan your travel around that and be flexible about where you fly, use something like Google Flights Explorer, which gives you a map of the best deals from your home airport, you're starting in a much better place than just going to your computer and booking a flight on July 22nd coming back on the 29th to whichever city comes to mind first. That's just not the right way to go about finding a good deal right now.
Kyle Potter is the executive editor of Thrifty Traveler.com, and he co-hosts the Thrifty Traveler podcast. Reminder, he's got an event coming up on Friday, June 12 at the Parkway Theater in Minneapolis. Tickets remain available at thriftytraveler.com, and it sounds like you're having a really good time, as you mentioned earlier, doing this thing.
It's a blast. If you haven't tuned in, tune in. Gunnar is much better at doing this than I am. It's like I said, it's the most fun that I think either of us have had in years, and I think that really shows. Thanks for the time, as always. Good to catch up. No, thank you, Dan. Appreciate you. That is Kyle Potter, as I said, from thriftytraveler.com. I'll give you his X handle as well, because he is in of himself a very, very good follow. We're a little bit late. I'm sorry I could not get to all the questions. A lot of good ones coming in. We might take a shot at a couple of them in the 4 o'clock hour of the program. That'll include Dr. Dan's Inbox about halfway through the hour. Alec Lewis will join at 5:15. When we return, Ode to a Dead Guy. That's next.
This is Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro on the Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This